By the way, this is Dark Case and you can call me Jack. And I'm back in the forest. I know you guys like it when I get out, and honestly it really helps me, helps my mind, and helps me to carry on making this kind of content. Today I'm going to share with you 5 final photographs. I've dug really deep to find photographs that give me that weird kind of feeling in the pit of my stomach. And I know you know the feeling I'm talking about because you're here watching this video. So thank you for being here. Sit down, get comfortable, lay down, do the chores, do whatever it is you do when you watch my videos. And now for today's silly little question. If you could remain physically one age for the rest of your life, what age would you like to remain? Let me know down in the comments. I'm going to drop back in from the forest a little later in the video, so just keep an eye out. But here we go. For thousands of motorcyclists, the Transfăgărășan Highway in Romania is considered a dream road. Sharp mountain bends, towering cliffs, dense forests disappearing into the clouds. Jeremy Clarkson once called it the best road in the world, and every year riders from across Europe travel there chasing the same thing: freedom, adrenaline, and breathtaking scenery. In July 2025, one of those riders was a 48-year-old Italian man named Omar Farangzin. Friends described Omar as adventurous, warm, and full of energy. He worked at Milan's Malpensa airport, loved motorcycles, and seemed genuinely excited to be exploring Romania's mountains. In photos posted online during the trip, he smiles constantly beneath his riding helmet, clearly enjoying every second of the journey. And one detail appears over and over again in those posts: bears. Romania is home to the largest brown bear population in the European Union, and along parts of the Transfăgărășan Highway, sightings have become strangely common. Tourists stop their cars to take pictures. Motorcyclists pull over for videos. Some people even feed the animals despite repeated warnings not to. So to many visitors, the bears almost seem calm, curious, like part of the attraction itself, an illusion that can be incredibly dangerous. Omar uploaded several photos and videos showing close encounters with bears beside the road. In one clip, he rides slowly past one of them and laughs softly to himself. In another, the animal begins slowly moving toward him while he continues filming. "It's coming towards me," he says. Watching the footage now feels deeply unsettling because although the bear appears calm, there's a strange tension underneath the moment. The kind of tension you only notice when you already know something terrible is coming. The following day, Omar was riding through the mountains near the Vidraru Dam, a scenic tourist area surrounded by forest. Authorities later said he stopped his motorcycle near a warning sign, specifically telling visitors not to feed the bears. But for reasons nobody will ever fully understand, Omar got off the bike and approached one anyway. His phone was later recovered at the scene. Investigators found several final photographs showing the bear walking closer and closer toward him. Close-ups, images taken from only a short distance away. And then, everything changed. Witnesses said the attack happened with horrifying speed. Other bikers watched helplessly as the bear suddenly charged and dragged Omar away from the roadside, pulling him down a steep ravine nearly 260 feet deep. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, including police, firefighters, forestry teams, and mountain rescuers. But even they struggled to approach safely. One rescuer later admitted the bear remained nearby the entire time, behaving aggressively and even charging at members of the recovery team. By the time they finally reached Omar, there was nothing they could do. To the world, André the Giant looked almost mythical, 7 feet tall and over 500 pounds. The 8th wonder of the world. He was the man Hulk Hogan body slammed at WrestleMania 3 in front of a roaring stadium. The Giant from The Princess Bride, a wrestling icon so legendary that WWE created its Hall of Fame around him. But behind the fame, the cheers, and the larger-than-life image, André René Roussimoff was truly suffering almost every single day of his life. Even as a child, André was different. He was born in rural France in 1946, weighing 13 pounds, and by the age of 12, he already stood over 6 feet tall. On his father's farm, he was strong enough to do the work of multiple men, but his size came with stares everywhere he went. People pointed, children laughed, adults whispered, and according to those close to him, that pain never truly left him. Years later, while sitting on a plane with wrestling announcer Jim Ross, André quietly admitted something heartbreaking. "You know, people think I have a great life, but I see them when they point at me," he said sadly. Then, according to the story, the giant then began to cry. André suffered from acromegaly, a rare condition caused by a tumor that flooded his body with growth hormone. His bones continued growing unnaturally, placing unbearable pressure on his joints, spine, knees, and organs. Doctors told him surgery might help, but André feared treatment would shorten his wrestling career, so instead he endured the pain, and over time, it consumed him. By the late 1980s, the man who once moved like an athlete could barely walk without agony. His matches had to be carefully choreographed around his failing body. He underwent brutal back surgery. Oversized medical tools had to be specially built just for him. Friends said he lived in constant pain, and to cope with it, he drank. Not casually either, he drank legendary amounts. Stories about André's alcohol tolerance became wrestling folklore. Wrestlers claimed he could drink over 100 beers in a sitting. Co-stars from The Princess Bride remembered hotel bars with enormous tabs and cocktails that felt like jet fuel to ordinary people. But beneath the wild stories was a sad truth. André wasn't drinking for fun. He was trying to numb a body that hurt constantly. And despite being adored by millions, parts of his personal life remained painfully lonely. His relationship with his only daughter, Robin, was strained by distance and complicated family dynamics. She later admitted she only saw her father a handful of times growing up. One of André's closest friends would later say that not spending more time with his daughter was one of his greatest regrets. And maybe that's the tragedy of André the Giant. The bigger he became to the world, the smaller and more isolated his personal life seemed to become. By 1992, his wrestling career was effectively over. The once unstoppable giant now relied on crutches just to appear at ringside. Every movement looked painful. Every step seemed heavy. His final match took place in Japan in December 1992. Just 1 month later, André returned to France after the death of his father. And for a brief moment, away from the arenas and cameras, he seemed like he was actually peaceful. The final known photographs of André the Giant were taken in Paris in January 1993. They show something very different from the unstoppable giant that most people remembered from television. Not a wrestling attraction or superstar, instead just a tired man sitting quietly with friends, laughing softly over cards and dinner. You can see the exhaustion in his face, but you can also see warmth, almost relief, as though for a moment he was finally allowed to simply be André and not a giant. 3 days later, on January 27th, 1993, André the Giant died in his sleep from congestive heart failure. He was only 46 years old. Okay, like super quick, I'm only going to keep you for 20 seconds. But currently I'm doing a bit of a membership drive for the channel. It's really just helping me to continue doing what I do. Right now we're at 278 channel members. Thank you guys so much. I know you don't have to support me in that way, but it means a huge amount that you actually do. I'm now aiming for 300 channel members by the end of May. So we've got about 2 weeks to make that happen. So if you feel like you want to support the channel in that way, then please do, and you'll get a bunch of exclusive stuff. Thank you so much, and now on with the video once again. Love you guys. See you in a bit. For years, Dr. Pratik Joshi lived between two worlds. In Derby, England, he worked long shifts as a radiologist at Royal Derby Hospital, building a reputation as one of the kindest doctors in the department. Colleagues said he was the sort of person who never made anyone feel like a burden. No matter how busy things became, he always had time to help, always polite, always smiling. One co-worker would later say that he knitted the department together. But while Pratik was building a life in the UK, part of his heart remained back home in India with his family. His wife was also a doctor, intelligent, respected, and deeply devoted to her children. She worked at Pacific Hospital in Udaipur while raising their 3 young kids, 8-year-old Mariah and 5-year-old twin boys, Nakul and Pradyut. Friends described them as a grounded, humble family, the kind of people who quietly made life better for everyone around them. And after years of distance and sacrifice, everything they had worked for was finally about to come together. Pratik had spent years laying the foundations for a future in England. He had adjusted to his life in Derby, embraced his work in the NHS, and slowly built stability so his family could eventually join him permanently. Then, finally, that day arrived. Komi resigned from her hospital job. The children prepared to leave India behind and begin a completely new chapter in London. And according to the people who knew Pratik best, he was happier than anyone had seen him in years. Just days before the journey, he met friends and colleagues for dinner and spoke excitedly about the future ahead. His family would finally be with him permanently. No more long-distance parenting. No more temporary visits. They were going to live together again under one roof. This truly was to be a new beginning. On the morning of the flight, the family made their way to Ahmedabad airport. There must have been so much excitement in those final hours. 3 young children preparing to board a plane to start a brand new life abroad. Parents thinking about schools, homes, routines, and everything still waiting ahead of them in England. At some point after boarding the aircraft, Pratik took out his phone and he captured one final family photograph. Pratik smiles into the camera beside Komi, while across the aisle their children beam with excitement. Little Nakul and Pradyut try their best to pose properly, while Mariah smiles brightly beside them. It looks exactly like the kind of photograph thousands of families take every single day before a flight. And maybe that is why it hurts people so deeply, because it feels so familiar. Air India Flight AI171 took off from Ahmedabad on Thursday afternoon, bound for London Gatwick. On board were 242 people. People returning home, people starting over, people going to meet their loved ones. For the first few moments, everything seemed routine, but shortly after takeoff, something went terribly wrong. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner appeared to struggle as it climbed. Videos captured from the ground later showed the aircraft flying unusually low, as though it could not gain enough altitude. Then came a mayday call from the cockpit. Only 32 seconds after leaving the runway, the aircraft descended rapidly before crashing into a residential area called Meganai Nagar. A huge fireball erupted across the skyline, and within moments, hundreds of lives were changed forever. As news of the crash spread across India and the United Kingdom, families desperately searched for information. People refreshed passenger lists over and over again, praying not to find the names they feared most. Then confirmation slowly began to emerge. At Royal Derby Hospital, the shock was overwhelming. Doctors who had worked beside Pratik for years struggled to process what had happened. One colleague described feeling a darkness settle over him after hearing the news. Another said it felt like somebody had been amputated from the department. People remembered the small things about him. His newly discovered obsession with fish and chips after moving to England. His excitement about walking through the Peak District. His warmth and generosity. Former neighbours remembered how, before moving away, he arrived at their door carrying gifts, just to say goodbye properly. Tea, cakes, and even a bottle of gin. That was who he was, a man who made people feel valued. And somehow stories like this become even more painful when the people involved were so full of kindness, because there is no anger to direct the grief toward. At Derby Hindu Temple, prayers were held for the family. Friends gathered together in disbelief, trying to comfort one another while struggling to understand how something so cruel could happen so suddenly. In the spring of 1980, photographers, scientists, and curious hikers began gathering around Mount St. Helens in Washington state. For weeks, the volcano had been showing signs that something was wrong. Small earthquakes rattled beneath the mountain, steam vents opened across the landscape, and slowly, almost unnaturally, a huge bulge began growing on the volcano's northern side as pressure built deep underground. Most people watched from a safe distance, but one man kept coming back closer and closer. This man's name was Robert Lansberg. He was a 48-year-old freelance photographer from Portland, Oregon, and he had become fascinated by the mountain. Day after day, he documented the subtle changes around Mount St. Helens, hiking through the wilderness with his camera, capturing images of a volcano that seemed alive. Friends later said he was deeply committed to his craft. Patient, observant, the kind of photographer willing to wait hours for a single perfect shot. And on the night of May 17, 1980, he camped near the volcano once again, preparing for another morning of photography. Before going to sleep, he wrote something unsettling in his journal. Feel right on the verge of something. Hours later, he was right. At 8:32 on the morning of May 18th, a powerful earthquake struck beneath Mount St. Helens, and in an instant, the entire side of the mountain collapsed. What followed was almost unimaginable. The eruption released energy equivalent to hundreds of nuclear bombs. A massive pyroclastic flow, a superheated cloud of ash, gas and rock, exploded outward at nearly 400 miles per hour, flattening forests and swallowing everything in its path. Witnesses described the scene as apocalyptic. One volcanologist radioed the words, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it." Then his transmission went silent forever. Robert Lansberg was less than 4 miles from the summit, far too close to escape. The ash cloud was already racing toward him faster than any human could run. And yet, instead of panicking, Landsberg did something extraordinary. He continued to take photographs. As the enormous black cloud consumed the landscape around him, he continued documenting the eruption frame by frame, capturing some of the final images before the mountain overtook him. Then, realizing he only had seconds left, Landsberg made one final decision. He removed the film from his camera, placed it carefully inside a canister, buried it deep in his backpack, and then laid his body over it to protect it from the unimaginable heat. Moments later, the pyroclastic flow reached him. He died instantly. 17 days later, rescuers finally found Robert Landsberg's body buried beneath layers of ash and debris, and underneath him, they discovered the backpack. The film inside had survived. Against all odds, the photographs were still intact. When the images were finally developed, they revealed something haunting. Frame after frame of a dark ash cloud growing larger and closer with every shot. You can almost feel the final moments through the photographs. A man standing face to face with one of the most violent natural disasters in American history, still determined to preserve what he was seeing until the very end. Every year in Nevada's Black Rock Desert, tens of thousands of people gather around a giant wooden figure known simply as the Man. As night falls, the structure is set alight in front of a roaring crowd. Music echoes through the desert, fireworks explode overhead, and for many people at Burning Man, the ceremony represents renewal, a symbolic ending, the start of something new. But in 2017, that celebration turned into something far darker. Because among the crowd that night was a 41-year-old man named Aaron Joel Mitchell, and within moments his name would become tied forever to one of the most disturbing incidents in the festival's history. Aaron had traveled to Burning Man from Switzerland, where he lived with his wife. Friends and family described him as deeply compassionate, the kind of person who would give away his last dollar if someone else needed it more. His brother Micah later said he only knew love and nothing else. That is important to remember, because after what happened, the internet quickly reduced him to a single horrifying moment. But before that night, he was a husband, a brother, a son, a human being, and nobody truly knows what was happening inside his mind in those final seconds. On the night of the burn, nearly 50,000 people surrounded the massive wooden effigy. Security teams formed human barriers around the flames, something they did every year to stop people from getting too close. Witnesses later described the atmosphere as surreal. Explosions lighting up the desert sky while the towering structure burned brighter and brighter. Then, suddenly, a man broke through the outer perimeter, then the second. At first, many people thought it was part of the performance, but it wasn't. Witnesses said Aaron sprinted toward the flames, while firefighters and rangers desperately tried to stop him. 2 responders reportedly dove toward him in the dirt, but missed by seconds. And then, in front of thousands of horrified people, Aaron disappeared into the fire. What happened next unfolded in chaos. Parts of the burning structure began collapsing, making rescue attempts incredibly dangerous. Emergency crews were forced to wait for debris to fall before they could safely reach him. When they finally pulled him from the flames, he was airlifted to a burn center in California. He passed away the following morning. Authorities later confirmed there was no alcohol in his system. Toxicology reports were discussed publicly, but to this day, no one truly knows why he ran into the fire. And that uncertainty became part of the tragedy. Some people immediately rushed to speculate online. Others just straight up blamed him. But his family would later see those comments while grieving someone they loved. And maybe that's the part people forget. Behind every viral image or shocking headline, there are real human beings left behind to carry the pain. Aaron's brother later shared a message online that stopped many people in their tracks. He was truly selfless, humble, compassionate, and cared about everyone. Then he added something even more heartbreaking. It breaks my heart knowing that he will be remembered by one terrible mistake, and not the good, kind-hearted person he was. And perhaps that is what makes the final photographs and videos from that night so haunting. Not just the image of a man running toward flames in the middle of the desert, but the knowledge that nobody watching truly understood what they were witnessing. Whether Aaron was experiencing overwhelming emotional pain, a mental health crisis, confusion, or something nobody else could see, we may never know. What we do know is that thousands of people watched a human life end in one of the most public and traumatic ways imaginable. And somewhere far away from the desert, a family received the kind of phone call that changes everything, forever.